Oh, they're still going. This is great. Pay no attention to the furniture that's going to be moving around beside me. We're setting up for the afternoon's plenary. Hi, I'm Hannah Holman. I use she, her pronouns, and it has been my honor and privilege to serve as the project manager for this year's Rural Arts and Culture Summit. Thank you. Thank you to Springboard for inviting me on this big and beautiful ride, and I'm so glad you're all here. Can we give another big hand to Dance Barn? Yeah? All right. Dance Barn Collective is a nonprofit organization based in Battle Lake, Minnesota, and they are committed to using dance as a way to build community by connecting dancers, educators, choreographers, and community members. Since founding the organization in 2014, Dance Barn has hosted over 50 artists from all around the country for an annual dance festival in Battle Lake and organized dozens of community performances, classes, artist residencies, screen dance projects, and a youth camp. Recently, they have been working to build the Rural Collective, a network of artists, dancers, and community organizers working to cultivate a supportive region for dancers. They are currently accepting applications for their 2020 annual Dance Barn Festival, if you're interested. And the performance you just witnessed was originally created as a site-specific dance in downtown Battle Lake, aimed to bring people together and feel collective joy. So thanks for sharing that with us, Dance Barn. I want to say a little thing about what we're going to do tonight. So one of the reasons that we chose to host this year's Rural Arts and Culture Summit in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, is because of the awesome art support and leadership that exists in this area. When we heard about First Friday events, we were really excited to plan the summit around the work and celebration already happening in this community. First Friday is a monthly community event celebrating art and creativity. All are welcome and all events are free unless otherwise noted. And you can find more information about First Friday activities in your brochure in your hot pink bag. Tonight we'll kick off our First Friday experience with food trucks and live music at 5:30 in the old Kramer's parking lot just across the street from McCrosty Arts Center. If you haven't been there yet, go check it out, it's amazing, in downtown Grand Rapids. There will be gluten-free and dairy-free options available at the taco truck, if that's what you're looking for. And signage will be available also explaining different options, and there may be other options available at other trucks or vendors. Food truck tickets can still be purchased at the registration table or at the McCrosty Art Center downtown. And music will be provided by Not Your Average Family Band and No Rest for the Pickers. It's going to be fun. So please dress for the weather, but know that there will be heaters in the tent too, so we'll get cozy with our friends known and new. It'll be great. I want to give a special shout out right now to Katie Marshall, the executive director. Yes. Katie, are you here right now, or is she like busy? She's probably like preparing. Yeah, she's so busy. I want to thank her for her incredible and invaluable work as a partner on this project. This community is so fortunate to have her. She's the executive director of the McCrosty Art Center. And I want to thank her for her compassionate and consistent work putting together many of tonight's activities and expanding the First Fridays that they usually have. So thanks to Katie. And now I am thrilled to introduce Drew Digby, Executive Director of the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council. The Arrowhead Regional Arts Council serves more than 18,000 square miles of northeastern Minnesota as part of the Minnesota System of Regional Arts Councils. They provide grants and services to artists and arts organizations. Drew has worked in economic and community development, taught at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and worked as a journalist, as well as run a pop-up art gallery and as a consulting business that helps artists with career and business strategies. So basically, Drew is really, really cool. I don't know if you met Drew, but he's cool. So I also want to say thank you so much to Drew, because he has been such a source of support as we've planning this summit and helping us figure out all the partners we needed and the right folks to have in the room. So thank you, Drew. Please welcome Drew to the stage.
Thank you, Hannah. It's really a joy to be here, and I'm happy that all of you have come to the greatest region of the state. I like to say that our 18,000 square miles are bigger than 8 states in the United States. So, I'm here to sort of say, in part, that this activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to appropriations from the Minnesota State Legislature's Arts and Cultural Heritage Funds. And give an applause for the Legacy Amendment and the Legacy Funds. But I'm part of a system of 11 regional arts councils and partners with the Minnesota State Arts Board that our goal is to sort of make arts accessible to everyone within the state and to help that the arts thrive in Minnesota. And the 11 regional arts councils are an amazing collection of people at the local level, many of them volunteers who work to sort of reach every corner of the 87 counties of this state. And it's been a really amazing job to sort of have this work here. The State Arts Board, I'm going to introduce their executive director in a second, but they've been around since 1903. There are 11 citizens who are appointed by the governor, and at least one member is selected from each of the congressional districts. And it's just been an amazing partnership between the regional art councils and the State Arts Board to do this. Before I introduce Sue, I just want to say, how many people here are here on a scholarship, either from one of the regional arts councils or from another source? Yeah, just sort of stand up and say hi. And I just want to say, give everyone an applause for sort of making that possible. All right. To introduce the main speaker for the next section, I'd like to introduce Sue Jens, who is the Executive Director of the Minnesota State Arts Board. The board stimulates and encourages the creation, performance, and appreciation of arts in the state. Jens joined the Arts Board in 2001. She has served as the agency's Director of Communication and Government Relations, its interim executive director, and has been the executive director since February 2009. She's an incredible partner, and please welcome her to the stage. Sue Jens.
It's a treat to get to work with Drew and all of the regional arts councils every day. And I'm going to do something a little bit later and go off script about that. Thank you all for being here. I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon, and don't let the after lunch doldrums set in, because you're not going to want to miss anything that's going to happen at this session. It's going to be a really terrific conversation. I've been lucky. I've been at all of the the Rural Arts and Cultural Summits since 2011, all 5 of them. And I love that this gathering is getting bigger and the content is getting broader, and the number of people coming to this every year is getting larger and larger. 25 states, that's fantastic. So kudos to all who played a role in organizing and making this day possible. I want to say a personal note, first of all. Some of you who know me know that I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, a farm that my father lived on and my grandfather lived on, and there are about 6 of you in the audience who know where it is. Scott and Mary and Mark and Rosemary, wherever they are, know where it is. So this work is really personal for me. The impact that you make working in a community, honoring the traditions and the heritage that already exist there, lifting those up, and then working collectively to imagine new possibilities for the future of those places is so inspiring. So thank you personally for the work that you're doing. I also want to thank you, though, on behalf of the Minnesota State Arts Board. We are a public agency, as Drew said. Our money comes from the Minnesota State Legislature and from the National Endowment for the Arts, which has federal taxpayer dollars. And it's our job to ensure that the many varied benefits of the arts reach and impact every resident and every community in the state. We don't exist to fund artists and arts organizations. We exist to make sure that the arts are available everywhere and to everyone. Now, I will say a few things about Minnesota. So for those of you from the other 25 states, if my colleagues from Nebraska or Montana or Wyoming were here, they would say exactly the same thing. So bear with me for a second. Here in Minnesota, we talk a lot about outcomes, about the difference that we're making through the arts. And we are trying to do 5 or 6 really big things with the funds that we have available, working with our friends at the Regional Arts Councils. And one of them is to make sure that the arts are integrated into every aspect of our lives. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we want the design, the aesthetics of the arts to shape our communities. We want the arts to celebrate the history and the heritage and the traditions of our communities. We want the arts to be used in better ways to promote our physical and mental health. There's growing evidence of how important the arts are, just keeping us healthy. We want the arts to help young people succeed, not just in school, but in life, to set them off on a career path that will be positive for them. And I think right now, and in this moment in our society, we want the arts to be a bridge, to say, even though we think that we are different from one another, we really aren't. We have more in common than we think. So I give you these examples, not to list off all the things we're working on, but to say that the success of the Minnesota State Arts Board depends on the success of all of you. We are intertwined. So if you don't know the Arts Board, or if you haven't been supported by the Arts Board or by one of the regional arts councils, I hope you will seek us out. And here's where I'm going off script. If you work for the Arts Board, we've got 4 of our staff people here, or one of the regional arts councils. Can you stand up just for a second? Do this quick, I've only got a minute. So if you have not been supported by our work, please find one of these people and talk to them, because we are here to help you do your work. Okay, now I'm going to get back on task, which is to introduce our next session. And I'm really so pleased to get to do this, because this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I'll start by saying a little bit about NASA. Arts, not space. The National Assembly of State Arts Agencies is an organization that's based in Washington, D.C. It's a membership organization, and there are 56 of us who are members. All 50 states, and then if you want to know who the other 6 are, come and find me later. It'll be a quiz. NASA really helps us do our work and moves this field forward through a variety of things, but one of them is by collecting and disseminating research. And so this afternoon, we're going to be hearing about this new action guide for rural prosperity and the arts. And if you don't have a copy, Pam will tell you how to find it. It's a partnership between NASA, the National Governors Association and the National Endowment for the Arts. And we all, I think, believe and understand that none of us gets anything done alone, so working in partnership is really so crucial, which is a perfect bridge to introduce the person who is going to tell us about this. Pam Brough is the president and CEO of NASA. She's had that role since 2015. You have a bio of Pam in your materials, so I won't read it all, but there are two things I think that you should know about her. I'm really fortunate. I know Pam and I get to work with her on an ongoing basis, but one of the things that I think is really important is that she's trained as a folklorist. So those skills of listening, researching, building relationships are things that she uses every single day in the work that she does, building partnerships and building relationships. The other thing that's really important about Pam is that she has worked at all levels in supporting and promoting the arts. She ran a local arts council in Louisiana, her home state, much like our regional arts councils. It was a local arts council. She then moved up and she was the state arts agency director, so my job, in Louisiana. And unlike Minnesota, where this Minnesota State Arts Board is a standalone agency, in Louisiana there's an agency above that that has culture, recreation, and tourism all as part of the portfolio, and Pam moved up and became the secretary of that State Department as well. So she's worked at all levels. She's now working at national and international levels, and I'm so thrilled that she's here to talk about this work that she really helped to spearhead. So please give Pam a warm Northern Minnesota welcome. Pam Brough.
Let's see. Water, check. How is everybody? You're fed, you're full, right? You're fortified, you're ready for what's next. Thanks so much, Sue, and thanks as well to Springboard, to Laura, to Michelle, and the entire team. I think I'm not the only one here who already feels not only the warm embrace of this entire convening, but the value in it as well. I'm feeling fortified, and not just from breakfast or a meal, but really just from being in this space with all of you. So, rural arts development is a top issue for state arts agencies. So agencies like the Minnesota State Arts Board work to improve access to the arts in rural communities in a number of different ways. And this issue has taken on new urgency in other policy circles, especially during the last couple of years, among governors, state legislatures, and other economic development policy advisors. So policymakers and rural taxpayers alike they've been increasingly frustrated that rural areas don't have access to the same resources as urban places. And let's face it, a lot of the policy interventions from the past have not worked as well as they were intended to work, right? And we all know the narratives well. Economically speaking, rural areas have recovered much more slowly than metropolitan areas since the recession. In fact, some rural areas have yet to recover economically from where they were in 2009 when the recession really hit. But both rural and urban crashed at that time, the economies, but urban employment has recovered while rural employment has not shown the same bounce. We all know, too, with the narrative that outmigration is another issue, right? About a quarter of all U.S. counties are losing population, and nearly all of them, about 91%, are rural. These serious long-term trends are motivating all of our elected officials to really reevaluate their strategies for rural economic development. And we at NASA want to be sure that the arts are a part of that thinking. You know, we know the challenges are real. We all know that, right? But they're also only part of the story of rural America, right? And we talked about the story and who should be telling the story earlier today. A more complete story is one that includes rural resurgence. A more complete story is also one that's about rural resurgence through the arts. I'm certain that everyone here can cite an example of a rural community that in some way is thriving through the arts, right? That's the work you're all doing each day. We know that the arts are integral to rural life and to what gives a rural community its distinctive character. We know that the arts provide sustainable livings for rural families and creative entrepreneurs. We also know that tribal heritage and rural traditions are preserved and expressed through the arts, and that the arts create a quality of life that can reverse brain drain and encourage community investment. But not all lawmakers were getting this memo, right? Unlike the mayor of Grand Marais this morning, he got the memo, right? Our challenge was to get that arts message to all elected officials, right? To the elected officials and the economic development leaders who shape their thinking in a language they can understand and from a source they find credible, right? So that's not necessarily NASA, I hate to say. So that's why we at NASA partnered with the National Governors Association. You'll hear me refer to them as the NGA, the National Governors Association, and the National Endowment for the Arts, as Sue mentioned, on a special initiative focusing on the arts and rural prosperity. The Arts Endowment provided funding for the project, and so we were, of course, hugely grateful to them for that. And the NGA was the lead publisher of the information. Super important point there, right? Lending their credibility and their influence with governors and economic developers. So my organization provided the arts research muscle. The first thing the NGA did was asked us for quantitative data. They needed hard facts and figures before they would even buy into this idea. So one of the first things we put in front of them was data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rural Establishment Innovation Survey. The Arts Endowment analyzed that data to measure the impact of the arts and design on rural communities. Some of you may be familiar with some of that research. That analysis demonstrated some startling conclusions. For example, rural counties with design-driven businesses recovered more quickly from the recession, and that was measured on the basis of weekly earnings. Rural counties with performing arts organizations report higher household incomes, up to $6,000 higher than rural counties that lack performing arts organizations. Rural counties with a strong presence of arts organizations in general had 3 times the positive population growth than other counties did. And one more, 2 out of 3 rural business establishments said that arts in the community are important to helping them attract and retain workers. And as you might guess, we definitely got the NGA's attention with all of this data. But the numbers by themselves are not, they weren't enough, and they never should be enough. We needed stories and examples in addition to a good partnership with them, a good rapport, and we knew that all of that together could certainly sell them on this concept. So we conducted a literature review and a 50-state field scan. Sexy, right? It was great. We collected stories and program examples to illustrate how the arts are driving economic development all across the nation. All in all, NASA collected 500 examples and stories to showcase different approaches for using the arts to nurture rural prosperity. So the whole point of the scan was to help the NGA see the arts as the secret sauce in their recipe for rural success, right? Or if you're from rural Louisiana, as I am, it's that hot sauce in our bag. And let me just, yes, that's a Beyonce reference, but I want you to know there is a lot of authentic Louisiana in that Beyonce reference. So if you're curious, find me later. It's true, it's true. So the arts are that all too secret ingredient, right? That punches above its weight in terms of results. You know what I'm talking about, right? Modest investments go a long way in the arts, especially when compared to other sectors. We're lean and mean. Yes, we are. The NGA took NASA's research, filtered it for what they thought would be most persuasive to policymakers, to governors. They developed an action guide with a little help from their friends to help governors and state legislators infuse the arts into their economic development planning and put their recommendations into action. And so hence, we created the Rural Prosperity Through the Arts and Creative Sector, which is an action guide for governors and states. I'd like to share a few policy recommendations from the action guide. Good news is that I know it's after lunch and I won't be explicating the 5 major themes and recommendations and the 27 different strategies for approaching the work, yay. But I'd like to share just a few strategies with you. You know, and 4 to be precise. If I could get a couple of minutes with any of your governors, right, or secretaries of commerce or other influencers in your state, this is what I'd share with them, and I'd recommend you do as well. First, raise the state's level of investment in cultural assets already in place in rural communities. Invest in them and sustain them for the future, right? Minnesota, through the Arts Board, is doing this work well, especially related to the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Here's an example. A current Grand Rapids grant, for example, is going to Leah Yellowbird to design and complete a traditional Native American beaded table cover. Leah's work will engage people in Grand Rapids and Duluth through her public studio, workshops, demonstrations, and exhibition of the finished piece. It's a part of the traditional culture that should certainly be sustained for years to come, right? So invest in what's here. Second, facilitate more strategy partnerships and joint planning between the arts and economic development. For instance, giving your state arts agency and other arts representatives a seat at the table in economic development planning would be a great start, right? Because when you're a part of the plan, then you can be a part of the investment and a part of the strategy to activate the plan. So it's important to be at the table. And it's fantastic that it's the National Governors Association telling governors this is how it should be. A third example, build a talent pipeline for rural areas by equipping your workforce with creative skills. You know as well as anyone, creativity is a muscle, and the arts are its gymnasium. If you double down on arts education programs, for example, you're building the pipeline, right, from the ground up. And that's critical and an important message for policymakers across the board. Here's one other example. Give more visibility to bright spots and examples that are working across the country. Lots of arts-based initiatives are making a difference in rural communities across America, and frankly, you all represent them. Policymakers can give you a platform, some high-level kudos, and positioning to better help you pull down new resources, new partnerships, and new levels of validation. So it's a 64-page report, as I mentioned, 27 strategies, 5 overarching themes, and I'm pleased to report that not every word in the action guide is written in wonky public policy ease. This is good. This was a feat. The report even talks about how the arts can activate rural mojo, is my example. And I kid you not, the word mojo is in the report. When you get to the report, and you will have an opportunity to, and turn to page 53, you will see it. Now, we all know that it's really important to never leave out the intangible benefits of the arts, right? The soulful benefits, the magic. But once the NGA figured that out, that was important for us, right? Because what it said to me is that they finally get it. We are succeeding in framing a narrative about what's right in rural America and how rural communities can thrive by capitalizing on the arts and creativity that they have and not what they lack. And as someone born in and still connected to rural Louisiana, as is Beyonce, with all of Louisiana's magic and its Mardi Gras and its wonder, I found their realization of the mojo and the importance of it hugely gratifying. And so our initiative is gaining great momentum. We're seeing coverage in national economic and policy networks. For instance, Governing Magazine picked up the story, as did the National Association of Development Organizations and the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations. Again, sexy, right? Just hearing it. To give the issue some extra visibility, we at NASA convened a Capitol Hill briefing to promote the concept and action guide. But we didn't want to do this to just benefit the DC policy folks, so we live streamed it and reached more than 22,000 people this spring. We were delighted to do it, and I share this with you to tell you that NASA and our partners will be relentless in continuing to spread this message and to promote this work. And I invite you to join us and be relentless in advancing this message. Essentially, what this initiative has done is it's put out a big welcome mat for economic developers, rural developers, governors, and state legislators, right? Inviting them to activate the arts as a viable rural prosperity strategy. And they're beginning to take us up on it. And so here's the example that I'm most jazzed about this week. And it actually comes from this part of the country. I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to talk about the Western Governors, but you'll get me in a moment. The Western Governors Association, inspired by this work, adopted a new chairman's initiative. It's called Reimagining the Rural West. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum is spearheading it. He's the chair of the association right now, and he has organized the work around the pillars of opportunity, connectivity, and community. Is there anyone here from North Dakota? Oh, good. So you have a homework assignment. Your governor gets it. And this is a moment in time for you, right? When your governor really gets it from down deep, then your homework during his term is to figure out how to work with your state arts agency, your advocates, your team, and really take advantage of this moment and capitalize on it. So there's the homework right there. So earlier this week on Wednesday in Fargo, North Dakota, the Western Governors Association held a day-long seminar to help Western governors and their teams understand and learn more about the concept. Here it comes. 25% of that curriculum was a full day. 25% of it was arts-based. The governors. I'm happy. One session, for example, demonstrated how the historic Maddock Opera House in North Dakota was renovated to become the new hub in its community of less than 500 people. The impact is substantial. And I know that's not surprising you, right? You've seen this kind of work be incredibly substantial in communities. So you're the beautiful choir. But now, the Western Governors Association is starting to see this and get it and understand it. An additional roundtable brought together arts leaders like Marianne Carter from the National Endowment for the Arts and Margaret Hunt from Colorado Creative Industries. The Colorado work is also incredible and really worth researching. Bringing critical economic development and community development partners to bear, the state arts agency there is helping rural communities value their creative assets and chart a course toward results with their Creative Districts program, like in Trinidad, Colorado. Population is about 8,000, so a little smaller than here in Grand Rapids. Their annual commercial building investments went from $1.2 million a year to $37 million. Their lodging tax collections went from $150,000 to $554,000. A big difference in a small town. And their downtown vacancy rates, do y'all know what those are? It's like the percentage of vacant buildings that are in your downtown. It's blight, right? Their vacancy rates downtown went from 63% vacant down to 13%. So far fewer vacant buildings means more gainful commerce, right? And most importantly, especially for us in this audience, their work is specifically designed to benefit the community without abusing the arts. Artists can't be priced out of these spaces, and they're building that in. At NASA, we're committed to sharing this work, getting it on the radar of all the right folks, and keeping it on their radar. State arts agency colleagues across the country have also been sharing this work, this publication, with lawmakers. They're grabbing copies of it and bringing it to legislative hearings, talking to governors' teams about it, economic development officials, and I want you to feel free to use this report as your tool, just as state arts agencies are using it as a tool and a mechanism to open new doors. That's why it exists. So there's a one-pager available for you today, which includes the web address for the full report, which is available to you free. The one-pager outlines the major recommendations for the systems changes policymakers and state officials can embrace to advance this work. And you'll find the one-pagers on the left, to the left of the registration tables, like back that way. Looks like this. So you get the web address and a little bit of information on the back of my one-pager. So please take advantage of it. It's here for you, and like I said, it's free, very important. Before we transition to the conversation part of this plenary, I ask that each of you please accept my sincere thanks for your work and for you, so many of you being at the vanguard of this real, sometimes messy, often difficult and critical work where you live. You are the superheroes of this work, and I'm so grateful for your engagement in it, and I'm sure your communities are grateful for your engagement as well. I also hope our action guide is a good tool that you can use. And now I'd like to welcome our colleagues to the stage for our next segment, because we will move into exploring this work and what it really looks like in California, in South Carolina, and here in Minnesota. Thanks. Let's see. We have a lot of space, y'all. There are 4 of us. Any bets on who's gonna really stretch out first? Right? Okay. Welcome, dear colleagues and good friends. Everyone have a mic? Great. All right. So I have asked these really dynamic colleagues to introduce themselves to you in a very specific way. I've asked them to share the work that they do in the arts and rural space and to not leave out the passion, right? I think we all want to know what's they're most passionate about in this work. And so we're going to dial up the inspiration here and begin our chat. So how about we just go to my left, and we'll keep going left. Right?
Hi, I'm M. Johnson, and I'm coming from California today, from a place called the Cuyama Valley. And I actually have a few slides. I thought I would take you on a journey to our small town in New Cuyama. So I am the executive director, along with my co-director, Jack, who's up there, of Blue Sky Center. So at Blue Sky Center, we're strengthening our rural communities in the Cuyama Valley by supporting entrepreneurship and building our regional creative and economic resources. So here's the Cuyama Valley in orange, as you can see. To the southeast, about 2.5 hours, is LA. And our nearest political center is Santa Barbara, and that's 2 hours to the west. So in Cuyama, the history is unique, but also I'm sure that many of you here will have some sort of feelings of your place and our place as well. Atlantic Richfield Oil Company actually built the town of New Cuyama in 1950. And just like many single company towns, when the company leaves, often the economy goes with it. And so ARCO came in, it's widely known as ARCO, came in and said, this is the Saudi Arabia of the West. And they were wrong. And so, so now Blue Sky Center occupies what was once ARCO's headquarters. And what we're trying to do, how we're moving into a more inclusive economy is, today, Cuyama is an agricultural economy. And with our headquarters, we provide technical assistance, space, amenities, and support to entrepreneurs and regional businesses that contribute to a local economy that thrives in resilience that's not extractive, but inclusive. We hope that by doing this, we're reinforcing solutions that uplift the strengths in our community and diminish the weaknesses to the place. So from above, you can see our facilities here. Just a little overview of we have 7 buildings, we have 5 huts, we have overnight accommodations, office space, and places for shops and for our local enterprises, which we host on site. And here's a view of our sky. So at Blue Sky Center, only 3% of our funding at Blue Sky Center comes from art-specific funding. We use economic development grants and earned revenue streams to leverage entrepreneurship and hire creative professionals to do the work. We hope that this stimulates ownership in a way that is diverse, inclusive, and celebratory of the Cuyama Valley. So an example of that is we have a hospitality venture where people come and stay overnight, and these are some of the unique opportunities for earned revenue that's specific to our place. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it means to be a creative professional at Blue Sky Center. So we employ creative professionals, meaning artists, makers, designers, any type of creative, to co-author the solutions that remove burdens in our community and provide more inclusive access to opportunities that celebrate abundance in the Cuyama Valley. To us, everything is art, or it can be. And as rural economic practitioners, it's definitely hard to separate economic development from arts and culture. To advocate for small, thriving communities, we must address housing access, we must address jobs, health, safety, quality of life, all of these things. And who better to advocate and address complex human-to-human issues than creative professionals whose job it is to elicit expression of identity, hopes, and dreams in communities. So I just want to tell you a quick little story about a business on site. Garrett and Jose are founders of a small business in Santa Barbara that's a screen printing, retail, and production company. And they found that by moving their business to New Cuyama, it was not only economically pragmatic of a decision, but it was socially impactful because it allowed for opportunities to develop in our community for youth to stay and work in their community. So this really opened my eyes with Blue Sky Center about what it means to have creative people leading small business, which is that creative people lead creative impact. Our challenge at Blue Sky Center moving forward right now is launching a self-sufficient model. After years of stakeholder engagement, meetings, and deep listening, we are approaching a catalytic project in the coming year, which is to launch a for-profit venture out of Blue Sky Center. A beverage company specifically, that is made by, of, and for Cuyama Valley. And starting a purpose-driven business is definitely hard, and is with a small team and in a small community. We're up against zoning barriers, culturally oppressive systems. The list goes on and on, deep political divisions, all of these things we're facing. But we're realizing that the power of artists is that they help our team see more clearly and hear more clearly these conflicts, and it brings it up in this initial planning stage. So one of our artists who's been working with us for the past 3 years, Noe Montes, he was reflecting on his time in Cuyama, and this just has really impacted our team when he says that one, if not the main thing I learned, is that change is going to need to be slow. And when I hear these words, it really strikes me as it's definitely it definitely is a complex topic when we talk about slow change, because it definitely needs to happen. But what we're realizing is that we can manifest a future where rural communities are seen as hubs of economic innovation if we have the patience and empathy to go at the pace of generations. Human beings take time, and in order to lead this work and ensure that it's inclusive and ensure that it's real, is that we do it slow. We go slowly, and we lead in a way that allows for ownership in the future to look like ownership in the hands of people and not systems of power. And with that, so I'm passionate about that.
Well, wasn't it great to meet Em? Oh, Susan, do you have a mic? I'm so glad.
Hi, everybody. My name's Susan Duplessis, and I want to say thank you, Em and Pam and Michelle. It's really an honor to be on stage with you all, and that was a beautiful story. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here representing our state, South Carolina, and I know I have several people in the audience who are also here with me. So if you're from South Carolina, would you raise your hand? I know there's at least 3 of you. So we're really happy to be one of the 25 states represented here at this conference. So thank you again, Michelle, for the opportunity. So I've listened today to all the stories and had some really great conversations about what we're all working toward. And I'm so interested in continuing to learn and hear from each of you. And Pam, I know you'll probably talk more about the NGA report, but trying to, just a shout out to that report, and I hope you all will download it. Whether you're named in it or not, I think we can all find our place in it, and I think it's going to be a really valuable tool for us to use to position the work that we're doing, not only between state arts agencies and legislators, but between groups like M represents, creating validity and place in this work. So thank you again for all the efforts of NASA. As I said, I'm from South Carolina, and it's a complicated place. And I think that's one of the big words that I've heard today about the complexity of where we all are from. And as I think about where I'm from, I was saying earlier in a session, because I have the privilege of actually working in the entire state, I feel like the whole state is mine. And I'm actually from Greenville, South Carolina, but when I talk about where I'm from, typically I'll talk about South Carolina as a whole entity. So I was really interested in the session earlier when people from Minnesota were there, and they were very specific about certain regions in Northwest and Southeast and et cetera. And I guess South Carolina is just that small that I can feel like I'm from the whole state. But that's been one of the valuable lessons of working for the State Arts Commission. in a way that I've gotten to traverse the entire state and understand the complexities of it. And it's part of what has actually driven me to create the program that I'll talk about today called the Art of Community Rural SC. Our state is not one thing. It is complicated. It is a variety of different experiences and expressions. It's perceived certain ways. I was having a conversation with Calvin from Mississippi earlier and with Shell from New Mexico earlier, and we were bemoaning the fact that often our three states rank at the bottom of whatever list there are that you don't want to be at the bottom of. And so, you know, this is where we are, and at the same time, we know that those are statistics and they are speaking to some truth, and at the same time, there's another beautiful story. There are beautiful people, there are experiences that are rich and deep, there are cultural traditions, heritage that's really beautiful that we need to find a way to celebrate. And so within that complicated landscape, we developed at the State Arts Commission a program called the Art of Community Rural SC. And I will put these trusty little booklets out for any of you who would like to get one later. It captures sort of the essence of how we're working and why we're working in this space. But briefly, just to explain what this is, the Arts Commission had been working in the rural space since its inception. It's now more than 50 years old. And we had some very direct programming that had occurred once the NEA was formed, and then there was the need for state arts commissions to be able to be receivers of that federal funding. Then, of course, we developed local arts agencies across the state. And so those were our primary partners. And as those were developed, we began to work less in those rural spaces to give room for those local arts agencies to take up that space and work. And so when I got to the Arts Commission about 13 years ago, I was assigned a certain territory in our state that was largely rural. And what I found is that in those 6 counties in particular, that so much of the communities that were there were not represented in any of the formal arts environment. And so that led, along with the creation of a designation that happened under President Obama's term, the Federal Promise Zone designation. Have any of you heard of that designation? So it actually offered itself to us as a way to work differently in a very rural place that was super underserved, super under-resourced, and where when we would have gatherings and people would come from one of the counties in the six county region, they would almost apologize for being from this area. And so I was trying to wrap my head around this, like, wait a minute, you know, this is not right. How can we do something different to really turn this thing upside down? What happened was I had the opportunity with a very generous boss, Ken May, who allowed me the latitude to actually participate in more than 40 hours of strategic planning in the 6-county region. When they got this Federal Promise Zone designation, they divided conversations into community development sectors. So we talked about public safety one day, we talked about health another day, we talked about education. And my experience in that was that we started with this idea, like, what's the big idea that we can go for to bring more money into our region? But the conversation was totally loaded with what's broken, what's missing, what we don't have. And so that led to this concept of let's start with what we do have. Let's celebrate who we are and actually ask questions. Gather people together and ask questions. Why do you call this home? What connects you to this place? What creates a sense of belonging for you? We did that very strategically with 6 mavens, 6 key connectors who were invited to become part of this process. And they were invited to create local teams that looked like their community. So we began to really get to experience the richness of place and the complexity of place, because everybody around the table did not look like me. And it has been a beautiful journey. We are 3.5 years into this. We have funding not only from the State Arts Commission, but also from USDA Rural Development. And it has been quite a journey. It's based on learning and sharing and experiencing place together and beginning to know one another as individuals rather than seeing each other in terms of race or where you live, how much money you have, how much power you have. It's about human-to-human experience. So I guess that's all I'll say. Does that make sense? Is that enough?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So that's why I'm here and really happy to be sharing this story with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And our host with the all-time most, Michelle.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is probably the first Rural Arts and Culture session that I've actually sat all the way through because I get to be part of the stage. So I just want to thank Drew Digby for inviting me to be part of this. I agreed to it 2 weeks after having my baby when I thought I could do everything. So my name is Michelle Anderson. I'm the Rural Program Director at Springboard for the Arts. And this is our office in downtown Fergus Falls. So Springboard is a community and economic development organization for artists, and our work falls in two different kind of buckets. So one is we support artists in navigating how to make a living and a life. So we do business skills workshops, healthcare resources, legal resources, and a whole slew of other things. And then the other part of our work is we connect artists to community development issues. And from this office in Fergus Falls, we do a lot at the kind of hyper-local level, working on local issues. We have an artist residency that takes place at a former mental institution. We had a recent project called the Year of Play. Some of the organizers are here in the room today. And I should back up, we opened the rural office in 2011 after an invitation from Maxine Adams from the Lake Region Arts Council, who asked Springboard had we ever thought about having a satellite office, which is what we called it at the time, and I'm going to talk about how that language has changed in a little bit here. So we're doing a lot right in Fergus Falls, which is a town of about 13,000 people. But we also have programs at the state level. We partner with the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, who are now known as Rethos, Places Reimagined, and we have a program called Artists on Main Street, which we'll be talking about in a breakout session today, and then national work like this event. So when I was kind of thinking about this concept of rural prosperity through the arts, I went back to thinking about our early days in Fergus Falls when I was given some keys to an empty building and some ideas of what Springboard did in St. Paul, but kind of the freedom to figure out what it would mean to do this work in a rural space. And one of the things, I think the kind of starting the programs that would help the individual artists in the region felt pretty simple because the skills that artists need to kind of run a business and figure out how to navigate things like contracts. That it's different in rural, but a lot of that felt simple to replicate. What felt a little harder was how to help the community understand that we were really here for everyone. And so I wanted to share this story of one of the first few months that we were open when I felt that we needed to send this message that we wanted to hear from everybody in the community, and we wanted everyone to kind of realize their own creative capacities. And so I went to the craft store and bought $25 worth of fake flowers and streamers and hosted a little bike decorating party. This is Ben Shire, who is now our mayor, and his two kids who have now, they're teenagers and they've participated in a lot of our programs. And I'm gonna share kind of why this day was important, but as we go through here. But it's amazing to think of what can happen when you just try something and you just invite people and you don't try to solve all the problems, but you just try to gather people to have fun and share what they love about their community. I mentioned I just had a baby, and I've been thinking a lot watching him learn how to. I'm hoping he doesn't learn how to crawl while I'm away here, but he's really close. And so I've been thinking a lot about like muscle development and how this work is so similar to the developmental skills of a baby, kind of as they're doing a little tiny bit at a time, and then all of a sudden they wake up the next day and they're rolling over, and then they're sitting up. But it's these tiny little muscles that I think we are constantly developing in our community, these creative muscles that lead to bigger things. I wanted to share another early picture of a project we did with Ashley Hansen and Place-Based Productions, partly because Ashley is here and we've learned so much from her and so much from all of the artists that are in these photos, but also because there's another mayor. This is Hal Leland, who was part of a scene in this production called The Kirkbride Cycle, which was about the history of the Fergus Falls State Hospital, and this memory of the mayor stepping into the scene and dancing with his fellow residents, even making mistakes and being totally cool about it. Like I remember he stepped in at the wrong moment and he just went with it and started pretending he knew the choreography. And I just, I go back to thinking about those muscles we were developing and how not only did it really humanize this man that sometimes just doesn't get to just be a person with a life and his own passions and feelings, but also just the fact that by being in these rehearsals with his community members, he got into more of a rapport with them, which I think this is what the arts really do. They build the relationships we need to act quickly when things do get urgent. From all these projects, I have our mayor's phone number on my on text, and we sometimes text each other at 6 a.m. about things, but it wouldn't be unless we had had these joyful experiences together through these art programs. So from those early days, we built those partnerships that we really needed to act quickly on, and we also learned the importance of giving artists the resources they need to just show what they want to see in the community. And this is a picture from about 1.5 years ago. We launched this program called the Year of Play with an organization called Partnership for Health. And who would have thought that this program called the Year of Play, where we were asking artists to do small projects that would encourage community interaction through joy and fun and surprise and playfulness, would also result in Fergus Falls' first ever drag show. This picture is a photo of Miss Lexi D's catwalk party, and those of you, I'm sure all of you got to meet Dominic as you were checking in today, but Dominic Facio is the rural program coordinator over there at Springboard. And through the Year of Play, we were able to support him to produce this amazing drag show that had standing room only. People were shoulder to shoulder. It was just the most joyful experience of expression and belonging that this community desperately needed. And just by having these small project supports fundings for the Year of Play, people like Dominic and many, many other artists just got to try something. And I go back to that bike decorating party and the importance of just creating the pathways for people to just try. And it's okay if it doesn't work, and then sometimes it's bigger than you could even predict. Now he's continuing to produce those shows. They continue to sell out. It's this staple in our region, and we needed it. We needed it so bad. Again, though, back to that $25 and the bike decorating party, just finding what's relevant has been another big piece of this work. So the reason behind the bike decorating party was, well, it's this biker walk to school week. We want to be part of this and show that we care about what other leaders are really working on in the community. We want to show how the arts can help them advance their goals and engage more people and get people excited. So the day of the bike decorating party, Patrick Hollister from Partnership for Health showed up and took all these pictures, and then he started coming to our office every day. And he was the active living planner of Partnership for Health. And he just got so excited and realized the arts could be a huge component of this active living work that he was doing. 6 years later, he comes into my office and says, Michelle, the Super Bowl is going to be in Minnesota, and they have these grants, and the deadline is next week, and we should apply for $50,000 to build a play sculpture on the Central Lakes Trail. And because we had this great relationship, we knew each other so well, we trusted each other, we just jumped right in. I was like, yes, let's do this. We wrote the grant. We got the $50,000. We picked Greg Mueller. Is he back there? Yeah. Greg Mueller from Lutz in Minnesota. We picked him to design the project. We worked with kids to hear what they wanted to see at the Central Lakes Trail, asked them what would make them show up with their parents. They drew pictures, they made sculptures. We shared that with Greg, and he came up with this beautiful, beautiful place that now every time I drive or walk by, people are relaxing and swinging and having fun, and they're surprised it's there. So we also, the other thing I just want to mention is through kind of those smaller projects, those relationship building, we were able to come up with something that feels really special to Fergus Falls, but that I would hope other people would think about doing in their own communities, and that's this idea of a homecoming residency. So many of us are thinking about how do we get young people to stay or young people to come back, but what I've been wondering a lot is what's the in-between, and we had this realization that many of the artists that we had already been working with had some kind of relationship with Fergus Falls, including our entire staff, and they had left and they had this desire to come back, and that the region was this great creative context for their own practice. So we realized we could just make that a thing and invite artists specifically to come home and work on projects with their community, give them support to stay for 4 to 8 to 12 weeks and reconnect with their home. So this homecoming residency is probably the thing I'm most excited about. It's still a new program, but we're just seeing amazing things. But I do want to say that I'm frustrated. I'm excited, but I'm frustrated that it feels like there's a lot of attention on rural, there's a lot of attention on all of our work, but it still feels like we only get that attention if we're responding to somebody's bad work. And this is what happened to us. A German reporter from Der Spiegel came to Fergus Falls and supposedly did all these interviews and research, and then he wrote an entirely falsified story about our town and painted this very bleak portrayal of Trump country. I'm not gonna lie, Fergus Falls is super conservative, but he made up complete lies about people and only came to take photographs to back up those lies and assumed that we would never find out. but we did. And so my friend Jake and I wrote this response. We had no idea what would happen, and it went viral across the world. We were on German public radio. We were on the BBC. The New York Times came. And we were able to tell our story, and that's great. But what I want is to be able to tell the story first and not be responding. And I think all of you are doing that, and we need to keep doing it. So I would just want to end with just how I'm scared about the world. It's really scary to have a new child and not know what is going to happen, but I'm also incredibly hopeful, and this gathering makes me so hopeful for my son's future, and he's making me think about all of this work so differently. So I just wanted to bring him in the room today.
Thank you. See, I told you, inspiration dialed up. So we have time for a couple of questions for each of our colleagues, and I'd like to go back to Em. I realize, because we had a prior conversation, that you are a believer in the arts as a tool for both resilient and sustainable economic development strategies, which is a really big statement, right? If there were a traditional economic developer in that chair, they would have perked up at that statement, because it is bold. Thank you. Could you please help us by translating how that idea manifests in the work that you do?
Well, it all comes back to the fact that I think that our team believes that art can be everything, and that we're surrounded by 551 artists, which are our community members every day. And I think that tangibly, though, because I want to be tangible, it means that we hire artists to lead economic development work. And so our backgrounds on our staff level, we try to bring a diversity of thought to the table and to co-author these solutions. So we have architecture backgrounds, arts backgrounds, performing arts backgrounds, visual arts backgrounds, design backgrounds. And we also, this is the work every day, and I think that creates a level of nuance to the solutions or the conflicts or just the day-to-day. But it's also about the artists we connect with, our neighbor artists out there who help us co-author these solutions as well. So for instance, Noe Montes, the quote we pulled up, himself as an artist, he has the power to tell a story and a narrative. That's his autonomy and freedom as an artist. But he's also has this ability to bring dignity to every human being that he comes across. And that sort of opportunity that he's talking to every single community member in Cuyama, and photographing them and bringing dignity to them, we're seeing the potential of that humanizing our strategies. So if you bring those photographs to the table when we're talking about, lifting up zoning barriers, for instance, and you start having that sort of empathy and human aspect in the room, that really, I think, opens up doors much faster. And just artists have the ability to connect to humans and see the differences and conflicts in the systems. They can unravel these systems, and it's just going the traditional status quo of economic development. It does not bring all these voices to the room, and it doesn't work, and it's not going to work in rural America either.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for making it tangible. Susan, I know you. I knew you before this panel today, of course, and I know that you are a firm believer in community narratives of and by the people themselves. I think we're all firm believers in that. But you've also mentioned that rural narratives are nuanced, they're complicated, especially those narratives around identity, right, in the space you were living in. Can you tell us a bit about, well, can you make that tangible, right? Can you tell us perhaps about a challenge you have faced in this space and how you navigated it?
Sure. Actually, it's kind of interesting. This project, really, the Art of Community initiative, was born out of a couple of different strands of energy. One of those strands was an article that appeared in the Smithsonian Magazine. It was an excerpt from a book that it went on to become a book called The Deep South. Have any of you read that or heard of it? So there's a book by an author, Paul Theroux, who is a travel writer and very renowned. And so he wrote an excerpt article that appeared in the Smithsonian Magazine, and I think it was probably in about 2014, maybe. And so in that article, which was entitled Soul of the South, he basically starts with his journey southwards into the Deep South in South Carolina. And so the story that he, his perception, his experience, he shares. And it was at the same time that I was working closely with people in the same region that I've just talked about, the 6-county region that sits just west of I-95. And this 6-county region's economy was destroyed when I-95 was built. And that's the story that a lot of us have. We're sort of become displaced economically because of a highway or something like that happens. And so at the same time that this story came out, when he's comparing South Carolina to a third world country, he's going into some of the counties that we're working closely in and that we know, people are there, real people, friends and neighbors, family, who are trying so hard. And so this article came out, and it just felt like it damned us all. It didn't just damn this region, it damned South Carolina. And so the idea about how we as a state are perceived is huge. And we certainly have contributed to the perception of our state. I know that, as I said, it's a complicated place, and we've got a deep and complicated history. At the same time, it changed me in how I photograph, in how I talk about place, because, again, I don't want to start with almost the stereotypical. Like as a photographer, I know one time after reading this article, and then I had the opportunity to be in Mississippi, and I was driving through a little town, and I saw this image of a child standing in the doorway of a house, and it was a very compelling photo, but it was going to be very much part of the stereotype. And I stopped, and I thought, I don't want to do the same thing that is done to South Carolina and to real people. So now, thinking about, humanizing is a word, I think I've heard throughout this panel. So these are real places and people with lives and connection. And so I don't want to be part of anything that furthers the stereotype or the perception. Really thinking, and so again, just to wrap this up, that was part of the energy. The area, the 6-county region, felt really burned by this national story. And so it really rallied people. It rallied them to say, we are a good place. We do love each other. We do have places that matter, and we are people that matter. And so that was a really, just to answer your question about perception, that was a challenge. The truth is it led to a couple of conferences where I actually got to speak about it. And my goal is to actually invite Paul Theroux back. So maybe at a future meeting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Michelle, I love Springboard. I love your work, and I love your values. And this morning we heard from Laura, the beautiful articulation of your values. And I'd like to focus for a moment on the rural-urban solidarity, which I think is so important, especially at this moment, right? It's almost trite these days to say, oh, we live in a polarized time. it's tough. We do, right? And too few people work towards solidarity in any way you can conceive of that. And so that's why I really appreciate that value around rural-urban solidarity. So can you help us understand a bit about what that means in your work? How are you approaching it?
Yeah, so I mentioned that in the early days of opening the rural office, we called it a satellite office, and that seems hilarious now because it has a very specific implication that we're just kind of floating around and absorbing or like channeling all of the resources and energy from our mothership, which we actually did call the St. Paul office at the time. After a year, I remember sitting down with Laura and then Carl Swanson, and we were all just kind of like, something isn't right the way we're talking about this. It just doesn't feel right. It's not what's actually happening. And the answer was pretty simple. We just realized we have two homes. We have dual contexts, and it's taken a few years to kind of get everybody on the staff used to it, but I think most people now, when they introduce Springboard, they say we're based in St. Paul and Fergus Falls. And it seems so simple, but there's something incredibly important about the fact that we are seeing kind of what this work looks like both in an urban city and then in a small town. And while it started out with us kind of replicating a few of the programs, it's really become more of an exchange, and it's become. Who would have thought, in 2011 that then 5 years later the country would be so focused on this concept of the urban-rural divide. So in a way, it felt like we were preparing for this particular time that we're in, and really equipping ourselves to be responsive and to kind of model what else is possible in that conversation. And the other piece of that, I think, is that a lot of the issues that we are challenged with in Fergus Falls, I think I have a lot of phone conversations with Laura where I'm kind of like, and this is a small town problem that I'm facing. She's like, actually, no, like, I have the same problem in St. Paul. And so I think we can get so used to those narratives of division. And of course there are unique circumstances, but I think it's really important to realize the things we have in common as well, and also the solutions that rural places are creating and the innovation that rural people are leading that can and should and does translate back to urban places. I think we all need to do more to share that we have knowledge and skills that we can bring to you in cities as well. So, we don't have a urban or rural urban solidarity program, and I think it's more just about a way of being in the world and modeling and just putting that language out there as another way to talk about it.
Our world needs that modeling. Thank you. So as we got to know each other on the phone first, we talked about funding, right? In the past 2 to 3 years in particular, more funders are beginning to pay more attention to rural communities, right? We know that historically, funding opportunities haven't been even across the country. So what I'd like to do is put you in the power seat here. How would you advise funders, there are funders in this audience, right? How would you advise funders to approach investing in rural communities? How do you believe they could best invest in change? So I'm giving you the power to tell them how it should work. I'm probably not giving you the cash, but I want to give you the platform to talk about what should the approach be? What should the funders' approaches be to investing in rural places?
Well, I think there's a couple components, right? One of them is for funders to see artists as not just producers of typical art, but like thinking about art with a lowercase a, and the ability for artists to cultivate spaces that empower and create more powerful human beings in the process, and create more sustainable solutions in our communities. And so maybe educating, first, like taking a step to educate themselves on the power of the artist as the creative community engagement specialist and the creative economic development solution finder and the actual business owner, and allowing for the artist to be an artist in the process. So more experimental funding, more ability to get funding to do work without having to come up with the outcome, because the powerful thing that artists can do is go beyond the imagined outcome when given their fullest creative expression. And also, from the artist perspective, maybe having an artist on the funding table too. You know, maybe it's having an artist in residence at that foundational strategy meeting. Just having a more two-way street to realize that the power of arts can cultivate so much more than we can imagine.
You know, and you have such an interesting funding structure for your organization, which is why I was really curious about the advice you would provide, because it's critical in the work you do. Susan, you know, your work is inspiring a number of folks, both inside your state, inside South Carolina, and beyond. And I'm one of the beneficiaries of that inspiration, because I really think it's inspiring folks to think about how government agencies can be different, how government agencies can do business in a way that centers more, right, the people being served, right? So a little less, if you will, let's see, ivory tower isn't the right word for it, a little less sort of service from the Capitol, right? And a more interesting balance, I think, in partnership with community. Could you talk a little bit about that work in your agency and how it's different than the way you worked before? And then if you could take a moment to tell us whether or not it's inspiring other kinds of work in your agency. And hers is remember, it's a public agency. She's with the State Arts Agency.
Thanks, Pam. Yes, so as I said earlier, the State Arts Commission had been working and doing direct programming early in the day, and then moved out of that space to let the communities sort of grow. And so the thing that I think really that happened over time was that we had a real value on inclusion and equity and access that we weren't then seeing in our own portfolio of grant relationships. And so in order to change that, because part of the success, and I'm not sure in the other state arts councils who are represented here, but part of the way we measure success at our state arts agency is by how many counties we actually get funding into. So if you're a state legislator, you want to know that the county you're representing, if you're going to support arts funding, that your counties are receiving some of that funding. So that was the real push, is we couldn't get funding into some of the counties. And so that was the moment at which we really kind of undergirded by a lot of work in arts participation, funded by the Wallace Foundation. Some of you in here may have been part of some of that early work. And so with some of that understanding about how arts funding works and arts participation works, and what are the barriers and who's not participating and who is, et cetera, we took that moment to really kind of realize that we actually create a lot of the rules that we work by. And if we create the rules, we can also change the rules. And so we loosened our laces, if you will, metaphorically. We loosened our laces a little bit, and we said, okay, and I did get additional funding from USDA Rural, which actually added sort of an ingredient that allowed us to work a little bit differently because we had other funding coming in. And the program that was created, the Art of Community, was cast in the spirit of learning and not necessarily saying there's a prescribed outcome from this. It was, we are going to learn about this new way of working in community development using arts and culture. And what we're going to produce a series of meetings in rural communities where we've come together and we've learned together. But we didn't say we're going, and I did say there is going to be a project that they do, but we didn't say what the project would be. We didn't say what the outcome would be. So we gave ourselves kind of a load of latitude, and we were funded with that. So I think the idea that maybe I'm trying to get to and not doing it very well, is that there was a bit of a risk that we took as a state agency to work differently, and also a recognition that we could make new rules, we could be more flexible, we could be less onerous in the grant process. We also, it's in an attempt to meet people where they are, recognizing that not everybody has come up through a formal arts kind of infrastructure or network. Everybody doesn't speak the same language. A lot of the language we had in our grant making maybe didn't make sense to people who hadn't been there before. So it was a real, I won't say dismantling, but loosening the laces, I think, is the best way to say it. And
A real shift, huh?
Yeah, it was. And so we've continued to put an emphasis on equity and access. And so as speaking to how the rest of the agency works, it has continued to sort of be part of one of the layers of how we're working. So it's pointed to as an example.
I joked earlier, yes. I joked earlier about giving M some power, and what you've demonstrated, Susan, is a real shift in power at your agency, right? And extending some of your power to the people you serve, right? And it's a beautiful thing. And, I asked you that question right after M's because she spoke about funders needing to really fund the experimental, and the exploratory. And you're a model of a government agency that's moving in that direction and has moved in that direction. So well done.
And may I say one more little additional thing that I think is really interesting is that in the past, and did I already say this? Stop me if I just said this before. I had a different session. Now I'm confusing. Did I already say it or did I say it earlier? But one of the things that we opened ourselves up to was funding things we would not have funded before. For instance, in a nature trail that the Maven wanted to add amenities to that nature trail so that it would begin to be a friendlier sort of place in a local community. That's not what we would have funded as a state arts agency in the past. And so what happened, because we did go there and we did fund it and we looked for ways that, those flower baskets or those picnic benches can be sort of artified, if you want to call it that. What happened, because we actually went there with this community and funded this really tiny project, is that led to the journey of bringing in a nationally renowned artist who came in and spent a month there doing a phenomenal project. And now he is going to be presenting at the North Dakota Main Street Conference to a Western regional audience about his experience in South Carolina.
So was his invitation to the community from the community itself?
Yes.
That was their decision?
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Could I
Go
just
ahead.
add on to something too? It's just in the ethos of change being slow and having to unravel so many systems that you're mentioning, Pam. It's also important for the small organizations to think wider in terms of their funding, and so when you look at the the scope of arts funding available for rural places, it might be growing slowly, but it's still not enough to really do the impact that you are able to do. And so what's really important is to look outside your box, even as an arts organization, and look towards USDA and look towards HUD funding and look towards these economic-based grants, and call things supplies and call things program staff and hire artists to do it and make it that way, just so that you can ensure that you keep paying artists to do this work that is so important.
Thank you. So, Michelle, speaking of paying artists, let's talk a little bit about Main Street and your work. The Main Street is a really important concept. There are Main Street communities across the country, and of course it seems supernatural that there would be great alignment between Main Street goals and work and the work of artists. Yet, not everything is simple, and certainly Main Street directors don't necessarily sort of come forth with an ability to understand how artists work and vice versa, right? So what's your approach to this work? I know when we spoke about it, you talked about the need to ensure that the dignity of artists is central to the approach. So consider this an opportunity for a teaser for your session on the Main Street work later, but could you share a little bit about your approach in this space?
Yeah, so when Serena from the Preservation Alliance, I don't know if she's around in the room somewhere, maybe, yeah. When she and I started talking, she runs the Minnesota Main Street program, and we knew we wanted to work on something together and just kind of started dreaming up where our different goals aligned. And obviously there were a lot. But I think her being also a city council person in Granite Falls at the time, and then myself, getting approached by a lot of city people, I think we came to the conclusion pretty quickly that there is just kind of some kind of a communication or language barrier. I think that artists do want to offer and be involved with, downtown revitalization, and many downtown Main Street leaders can kind of see the importance of including artists. And so what we decided to do was start a cohort of 4 Main Street communities that could learn alongside of each other about how to work with artists, everything from the very basic things like how to put out a call for artists to how to do contracts, how to handle pay, and then the more complex stuff like how do you work communicate your goals as a Main Street director, but then also give artists the freedom and to experiment and do what they feel is most authentic to their practice. It's still a pretty young program, and it's based on a lot of the other community development programs that Springboard has done, like Irrigate in St. Paul. So there's a great example of rural urban solidarity. We're kind of taking that model and seeing what it looks like in a rural place. And it's been the big part of it is that we have trainings for the Main Street directors that are separate, and it's all about kind of here's how artists are going to think about this, here's some things that might come up, here's how to let go of what you expect, just let go. I think we've started a lot of those trainings just saying, if you have an image of what it's going to mean for an artist to work downtown, like, let it go out the door right now and wait and see what the artists want to do and what they have to say. And then for the artists, it's the flip side of that conversation. So like, get good at understanding what the economic development challenges are in your town. Learn what the workforce issues are. Learn what businesses are struggling with or what they could use help with. So kind of just helping both sides of that coin, get well versed in each other's worlds, and then realize you live in this, you live in the same world and you can collaborate. But I think what Springboard, what we really feel like we can offer to that is just the really basic tools. It's really mysterious for like a Chamber of Commerce person to hire an artist. Like how much do you offer them for this concert or for this mural? And then artists often don't have, they're also, we try to remind artists, you need to know how much you charge. You need to know how much it costs to do this service. You can be flexible. Here's how you can start and say what it really costs you, but you can bend if it feels important to your heart and your passion. You can do it for less, or you can do it for more if it doesn't feel so right. And so we're just really trying to kind of learn alongside of these folks, and then give them the resources that we know work. And then we learn in the process. And then the big piece of that is that the Main Street directors that we've been working with, the whole point is that we hope after a couple of years of kind of leading them through this program that they then have this mechanism that they can use in any circumstance. So they now have these templates to do calls for art, to do contracts, and even like selection of projects. They know kind of how to lead that conversation and looking at artist proposals. So, and what I love the most is that some of the Main Street directors that we worked with, they did have very specific ideas in mind. And I love how a year later, they're like, I'm so glad we didn't do that, and we ended up with this completely different thing. And some of them say like the proposals they looked at and didn't think would be the most successful ended up being the best projects with the best outcomes. And so it's really just it's kind of just letting go of your expectations on both sides.
Those are very powerful translation services you're providing, and then some. So I'd like us to move toward closing with a nod to the Rural Action Guide, right? The Arts and Rural Prosperity. You all heard me say earlier that we helped to create that guide as a great big welcome mat, right? For policymakers, economic developers, governors, legislators, rural developers, et cetera, to help them engage, right, in the arts as a viable strategy for rural prosperity. And it's a tool, of course, as I mentioned, we are sharing directly with folks in the policy space. And today, I also mentioned we are sharing it with you and are delighted to be able to do so, to be here to do so. So I'd like to ask our panel if you have any advice you might give the folks in the audience about how to effectively use the tool. We can mix it up. Anyone can go first.
I can
Emma's ready.
I'll go first. I think that, when I've read through this report, what I've realized is that we, as rural practitioners, need to be able to translate our work into policy, and that's a really great guide to be able to do that. And so look at those patterns, look at the way that you're collecting data and using artists to tell that data through stories and through dignified and more inclusive strategies, and then and write your own policy in your jurisdiction, right? Like get on board with that sort of idea. And to take that up a notch, I think one of the biggest outcomes from reading that report is just that how powerful would it be if more rural artists were in the seats of like governor seats, and in the seats of county seats, and how beneficial would that look? And so being able to talk the talk is really important, and then go after it, and like to use the mayor's term too, like it's available to run. And we all wear so many hats already, so I think putting on another hat is doable.
The power. I love it. Thank you.
Well, I would just say to position yourself within the report, to see how you fit. Every state is represented. If you're not the entity that's represented in that report, I would reach out to that group that is to talk to them about what they're doing and what you're doing, because the more of us that come together as a body, I think obviously the more impact we have. So that would be a simple thing to do.
Thank you. And you also reminded me that, so if your program is not in the report, when you go online, you will see not only the report, but a suite of information that surrounds the report that includes your own opportunity to upload your program. So you can be in the report and a part of it by uploading or typing out your own story, your own program to be a part of the compilation that's online. Michelle.
Yeah, I think this report and other kinds like it, like the Creative Minnesota reports that have been such an amazing tool for us here, can be a way to just start a conversation. I think it's always great to have these to be a reason to kind of convene people and discuss them, and then see what the reactions are, like what doesn't quite feel right, and why does that feel different in this community. So I know that when we hosted a meeting about the Creative Minnesota report that was on the Fergus Falls area, people showed up that wouldn't normally maybe come to an arts event, but it's an inroad to kind of to show your relevance. But then I think it's just as important, as Pam mentioned when she was giving the talk earlier, to back that up with the intangible, the human stories behind those numbers, because both they can't stand alone.
Thank you. Would you please help me thank our incredible and inspirational panel of speakers? Thank you. This has been fun. I didn't see anybody nodding off at all. Congratulations and thanks. And I saw so many interesting moments. One of them was, let's see if I can remember, who mentioned, oh darn it, and everyone started writing. It was you. The year of fun. I saw so many pens to paper. I mean, so I think that I'm hopeful that you had as much fun at this session as I did, and that you got as much out of it as I did, which was a lot. And also, I need to let you know that you'll be officially on break now, and your breakout session begins at 3:45. See you at break. See you at breakouts. Bye, everybody.